Brandon Hargrove's fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code appearing on his monitor in rapid succession. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his face in the dimly lit home office. At 39, he wore the focused expression of a man who had found his calling in life, both in his career as a software engineer and in his role as a husband and father. A light knock on the door broke his concentration. He swiveled in his chair to see his wife, Vanessa, leaning against the doorframe. At 35, she exuded an effortless grace, her business attire perfectly pressed despite the late hour. "Hey," she said, offering a tired smile. "Just wanted to let you know I'm heading to bed. Early flight tomorrow." Brandon nodded, his eyes lingering on her face. "Another conference?" "Yeah, big pitch in New York. Should be back by Friday." Vanessa's gaze drifted to the clutter of empty coffee mugs on his desk. "Don't work too late, okay?" "I won't," Brandon promised, even as his mind itched to return to the problem he'd been solving. "Good luck with the pitch." As Vanessa turned to leave, Brandon felt a familiar pang in his chest. These moments, brief exchanges in doorways, quick goodbye kisses had become the norm in their 12-year marriage. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, their lives had begun to orbit further and further apart. He turned back to his computer, fingers hovering over the keys. The house settled into silence around him, broken only by the soft hum of electronics and the distant tick of a clock. This was his element, the quiet, the focus, the satisfaction of a job well done. It was what had propelled him to success in Silicon Valley, allowing him to provide the life he'd always dreamed of for his family. And yet, Brandon's eyes drifted to the framed photo on his desk. It was from their vacation to Hawaii 5 years ago, Vanessa laughing as she built a sandcastle with their daughter, their son toddling towards the camera with chubby arms outstretched. Brandon's throat tightened. When was the last time they'd all laughed together like that? He shook his head, forcing himself to refocus on the code. This was just a busy period, he told himself. Once Vanessa's big project was over, things would settle down. They'd have more time for each other, for the kids. Everything would be fine. The next morning, Brandon woke to an empty bed and a hastily scrawled note on Vanessa's pillow. "Didn't want to wake you. See you Friday. Love, V." He sighed, running a hand through his sleep-mussed hair. Another week of solo parenting lay ahead. As he went through the motions of getting the kids ready for school, Brandon couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his stomach. He watched as 8-year-old Lily carefully packed her backpack, while 5-year-old Max zoomed around the kitchen, making spaceship noises. "Daddy," Lily said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she zipped up her bag. "When's Mom coming home?" Brandon forced a smile. "Friday, sweetheart." "Just like last time." Lily nodded, but her shoulders slumped slightly. "Okay, it's just she promised to help me with my science project this weekend." "I can help you with that," Brandon offered, ruffling her hair. "What's it about?" As Lily launched into an explanation about photosynthesis, Brandon felt a mixture of pride and sadness wash over him. His daughter was growing up so fast, and Vanessa was missing so much of it. He made a mental note to talk to her about cutting back on travel when she returned. The week crawled by in a blur of work deadlines, school pickups, and bedtime stories. By Friday evening, Brandon found himself pacing the living room, waiting for the sound of Vanessa's key in the lock. When she finally walked through the door, wheeling her suitcase behind her, he was struck by how tired she looked. "Hey," he said, moving to take her bag. "How was the trip?" Vanessa gave him a wan smile. "Exhausting but successful. We landed the account." "That's great," Brandon replied, searching her face for something. A spark of excitement, perhaps, or a hint of the passion that had drawn him to her all those years ago. Instead, he found only fatigue and distraction. "I'm beat," Vanessa said, stifling a yawn. "Mind if I grab a quick shower before dinner?" Brandon nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "Of course. Take your time." As she disappeared upstairs, Brandon busied himself with reheating the lasagna he'd prepared. He set the table, poured 2 glasses of wine, and waited. And waited. Nearly an hour passed before Vanessa reappeared, her hair damp and tousled. She'd changed into sweatpants and one of Brandon's old t-shirts, an outfit that used to make his heart skip a beat. "Now, It just emphasized how small and fragile she looked. "Sorry," she murmured, sliding into her chair. "I guess I dozed off for a bit." Brandon pushed down the flicker of irritation that rose in his chest. "It's fine. You must be exhausted." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the clink of forks against plates echoing in the quiet kitchen. Brandon cleared his throat. "So, tell me about the trip. How did the pitch go?" Vanessa launched into a detailed account of her presentation, her eyes lighting up as she described the client's reaction. Brandon listened, nodding in all the right places, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her enthusiasm seemed forced, almost rehearsed. And then Travis swooped in with the numbers, and that sealed the deal, Vanessa was saying, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Brandon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Travis? Is he new on your team?" "Oh, no," Vanessa replied, her cheeks flushing slightly. "He's been our sales director for about a year now. I'm sure I've mentioned him before." Had she? Brandon racked his brain, but came up empty. He forced a smile. "Right, of course. Well, it sounds like you two make a great team." Vanessa's eyes darted away, focusing on her plate. "Yeah, we work well together." The conversation lulled again, an uncomfortable silence settling between them. Brandon found himself studying his wife, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor. The way she avoided his gaze, the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her wine glass. It was as if a stranger had taken the place of the woman he'd known for over a decade. "Vanessa," he said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Is everything okay?" She startled at his touch, pulling her hand back as if burned. "What? Yes, of course. I'm just tired, that's all." Brandon's chest tightened, a cold tendril of fear wrapping around his heart. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you, or if work is getting to be too much." "I said I'm fine, Brandon," Vanessa snapped, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. She took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. "I'm sorry. It's just been a long week. I think I'm going to turn in early, if that's okay." Before Brandon could respond, she was up and moving towards the stairs. He watched her go, a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something was very wrong, and he was determined to find out what it was. The next morning, Brandon woke early, his mind churning with worry and suspicion. He padded downstairs, careful not to wake Vanessa or the kids. As he started a pot of coffee, his eyes fell on the laundry basket in the corner of the kitchen. Vanessa's suitcase sat next to it, still unpacked. Without really thinking about what he was doing, Brandon found himself rifling through the dirty clothes. He paused as his hand brushed against something silky, Vanessa's favorite blouse, the one she always wore for important meetings. As he lifted it from the basket, a faint odor caught his attention. It wasn't Vanessa's usual perfume, but something muskier, more masculine. Heart pounding, Brandon examined the blouse more closely. There near the collar was a small stain, white, slightly crusty. His stomach lurched as the implications hit him like a physical blow. No, he thought, shaking his head in denial. There had to be another explanation. Vanessa would never. But even as he tried to rationalize it away, Brandon knew in his gut what he was looking at. The distance, the late nights, the mysterious Travis, it all suddenly, horribly made sense. For a long moment, Brandon stood frozen in the kitchen, the stained blouse clutched in his trembling hands. Part of him wanted to rush upstairs, to confront Vanessa with the evidence of her betrayal. But the rational, methodical part of his brain, the part that made him an excellent software engineer, held him back. He needed proof. Incontrovertible, scientific proof. With shaking hands, Brandon carefully folded the blouse and placed it in a plastic bag. He scribbled down the address of a discreet testing lab he'd once used for a work project, then hid the bag in his briefcase. As he heard stirring from upstairs, Brandon quickly straightened up the kitchen, his mind racing. He dropped the blouse off at the lab on his way to work. In a few days, he'd have his answer. And then he'd decide what to do next. The next few days passed in a blur of anxious waiting. Brandon went through the motions of his daily routine work, family dinners, bedtime stories, all while carrying the weight of his suspicions. He watched Vanessa like a hawk, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But if she noticed his scrutiny, she gave no indication. On Tuesday evening, As Brandon was helping Lily with her homework, his phone buzzed with an email notification. His heart leapt into his throat as he saw the sender. Discreet testing services. With trembling fingers, he opened the message. The results were clear, clinical, and devastating. The substance on the blouse was indeed semen, and it contained traces of a particularly virulent strain of syphilis. Brandon felt the room spin around him, his daughter's voice fading into background noise as the implications hit him full force. Vanessa had not only betrayed him, she had potentially exposed him to a life-threatening disease. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily's worried voice cut through the fog of shock and anger. Brandon blinked, forcing himself to focus on his daughter's concerned face. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired. Why don't you finish up that last problem on your own? I think you've got the hang of it now." As Lily bent back over her notebook, Brandon excused himself and retreated to his home office. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it as he struggled to catch his breath. His mind raced, cycling through a whirlwind of emotions: hurt, betrayal, anger, fear. What now? The question echoed in his head, demanding an answer. Should he confront Vanessa immediately? Kick her out? File for divorce? Or should he bide his time? Gather more evidence? As the initial shock began to subside, Brandon's analytical nature reasserted itself. He needed more information before he could make a decision. And more importantly, he needed to protect himself and his children from the potential fallout of Vanessa's reckless behavior. With a deep breath, Brandon moved to his computer and began to research. He looked up symptoms of syphilis, treatment options, and long-term prognosis. The more he read, the colder his anger became. Vanessa hadn't just betrayed their marriage vows, she'd put his very life at risk. As he delved deeper into his research, a plan began to form in Brandon's mind. He would not confront Vanessa. Not yet. Instead, he would dig deeper, uncover the full extent of her deception. And when he had all the facts, all the evidence, then he would act. The sound of the front door opening jolted Brandon from his thoughts. He quickly closed his browser tabs and stood, smoothing down his shirt. As he left his office, he saw Vanessa in the entryway, kicking off her heels. "Hey," she said, offering him a tired smile. "Sorry I'm late. Last-minute client call." Brandon studied her face, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But all he saw was the same distracted, slightly distant expression she'd worn for months. "No problem," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry." Vanessa nodded, already heading for the stairs. "Thanks, but I think I'll just turn in. It's been a long day." As she disappeared upstairs, Brandon felt a surge of cold determination. He would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. And when he did, Vanessa would learn that betraying Brandon Hargrove was the biggest mistake of her life. Brandon sat at his desk, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly as he steeled himself for what he was about to do. The house was quiet. Vanessa had left for another business trip that morning, and the kids were asleep upstairs. He took a deep breath, then began typing. Years of working in tech had given him the skills he needed to bypass Vanessa's passwords and access her personal cloud storage. As he navigated through folders and files, his heart raced. Part of him hoped he wouldn't find anything, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But then he saw it, a folder labeled NYC Trip Videos. Brandon's finger hesitated over the mouse. Did he really want to see what was inside? Could he handle it? The image of the stained blouse flashed through his mind, hardening his resolve. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. He double-clicked. The folder opened, revealing a series of video files with dates as titles. With a shaking hand, Brandon clicked on the most recent one. The video began to play, and Brandon's world shattered. There on the screen was Vanessa, his wife of 12 years, the mother of his children, locked in a passionate embrace with another man. Brandon recognized him from photos on Vanessa's work profile. Travis Delaney, the 38-year-old sales director she'd mentioned. "Oh, Travis," Vanessa moaned on screen, her voice filled with a passion Brandon hadn't heard in years. "I've missed you so much." Travis's hands roamed over Vanessa's body as he pushed her onto the hotel bed. I can't get enough of you, Vanessa. When are you going to leave that boring husband of yours and be with me?" Vanessa laughed, a sound that cut through Brandon like a knife. "Soon, baby. I promise. I just need a little more time." Brandon slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch anymore. He stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before he emptied the contents of his stomach. As he heaved and retched, sobs racked his body. The betrayal he'd suspected was now confirmed in the most brutal way possible. When he finally regained some composure, Brandon splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him was a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, with a coldness in his gaze that he'd never seen before. In that moment, something inside Brandon hardened. The shock and hurt began to crystallize into something darker, colder. Rage. He returned to his computer, forcing himself to watch more of the videos. Each one was like a dagger to his heart, but he made himself catalog every detail, every betrayal. The videos weren't just from New York, they spanned months, maybe even years. Cities all over the country, hotel rooms, even their own home when Brandon had been away for work conferences. As the sun began to rise, Brandon finally stepped away from the computer. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. Over the next few days, Brandon began to implement his plan. He started by creating emotional distance between himself and Vanessa. When she returned from her trip, he greeted her with cold indifference. "Hey," Vanessa said, wheeling her suitcase into the foyer. "How were things while I was gone?" Brandon barely looked up from his laptop. "Fine." Vanessa paused, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Is everything okay?" "Why wouldn't it be?" Brandon replied, his tone flat. "I don't know, you just seem off." Brandon finally met her gaze, his eyes hard. "I'm fine, Vanessa. Just busy with work. How was your trip?" "Oh, good. Productive." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "I'm going to go unpack." As she hurried upstairs, Brandon allowed himself a small, grim smile. Let her wonder. Let her worry. It was the least she deserved. Over the next few weeks, Brandon continued his cold treatment. He spoke to Vanessa only when necessary, avoided physical contact, and threw himself into work and caring for the children. Vanessa, caught up in her affair and her own guilt, barely seemed to notice the change at first. One evening, as Brandon was putting the kids to bed, Lily looked up at him with worried eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy fighting?" Brandon's heart clenched. He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "No, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Lily bit her lip. "You don't talk to each other anymore. And Mommy looks sad all the time." Brandon forced a smile. "Grown-up relationships can be complicated sometimes, Lily. But I want you to know that no matter what happens between me and Mommy, we both love you and Max very, very much." "Okay." Lily nodded, but she didn't look convinced. As Brandon turned out her light and closed her door, he felt a fresh wave of anger towards Vanessa. How dare she put their children through this? Days turned into weeks, and Brandon's cold demeanor began to have its effect on Vanessa. She grew more agitated, more desperate for his attention. One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, she finally confronted him. "Brandon, what the hell is going on with you?" Vanessa demanded, slamming a plate down on the counter. "You've barely said 2 words to me in weeks." Brandon turned to face her, his expression impassive. "I wasn't aware I had to entertain you, Vanessa. Don't you have work to keep you busy? Or perhaps other distractions?" Vanessa's face paled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Brandon said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just wondering how you manage to juggle it all: work, family, your extracurricular activities." Vanessa started, but he cut her off. "Save it, Vanessa." "I know." The color drained from her face. "Know what?" Brandon laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "Everything. The affair, the disease, all of it. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Vanessa stumbled back, gripping the counter for support. I can explain." Brandon's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Explain how you've been fucking your coworker for months, maybe years? Explain how you brought a potentially fatal STD into our home, risking not just my health but our children's? Please, Vanessa, I'm all ears." Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. It's not what you think, Brandon. I was lonely. You were always so distant. Don't you dare try to blame this on me, Brandon snarled. I have been nothing but faithful, nothing but supportive of your career. And this is how you repay me. Vanessa's tears spilled over. I'm sorry, Brandon. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I never meant for it to go this far. Please, can we work this out? For the kids. Brandon stared at her, his expression cold. The kids? Now you care about the kids? Where was that concern when you were risking their future by sleeping with Travis? Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. How did you? I told you, I know everything. Brandon turned away, unable to look at her anymore. I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight. I can't even stand to be near you right now. As Vanessa fled the room, sobbing, Brandon felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Part of him wanted to break down, to scream and rage at the unfairness of it all. But a larger part, the part that had been growing colder and harder with each passing day, felt only a grim satisfaction. This was just the beginning of Vanessa's reckoning. The next morning, Brandon woke early and headed to his home office. He had an appointment to keep a video call with Neil Kavanaugh, the ruthless divorce lawyer known for leaving spouses with nothing. As Brandon logged into the call, he was greeted by the sharp, calculating gaze of Neil Kavanaugh. The lawyer's reputation for ruthlessness was evident in every line of his face. Mr. Hargrove, Neil said, his voice clipped and professional. I understand you're seeking a divorce under difficult circumstances. Brandon nodded, his jaw set. That's correct. My wife has been unfaithful, and worse, she's contracted a potentially fatal STD that she's hidden from me. Neil's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. And I assume you have evidence to support these claims? Extensive evidence, Brandon confirmed. Videos, emails, medical test results. I've documented everything. A small, predatory smile curved Neil's lips. Excellent. That will give us a significant advantage in court. Now, Mr. Hargrove, what exactly are your goals for this divorce? Brandon leaned forward, his eyes hard. I want to protect my children and myself. I want full custody, and I want Vanessa to walk away with nothing. She made her choice when she decided to betray our family. Neil nodded approvingly. With the evidence you've gathered, those goals are certainly achievable. However, I must advise you to keep your wife's illness under wraps for now. If it becomes public knowledge before the divorce is finalized, it could complicate matters. Understood, Brandon said. What's our next step? Gather more evidence, Neil replied. The more we have, the stronger our case will be. I'd also recommend hiring a private investigator to follow your wife on her business trips. It could provide valuable leverage. As the call ended, Brandon felt a sense of grim determination settle over him. He had a plan now, a path forward. Vanessa had dug her own grave, and now she was going to lie in it. Over the next few weeks, Brandon threw himself into building his case against Vanessa. He hired Evan Larkin, a discreet but thorough private investigator, to follow Vanessa on her trips. The reports Evan sent back were damning. Not only was Vanessa continuing her affair with Travis, but they were using company resources to fund their trysts. One evening, as Brandon was reviewing Evan's latest report, his phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Brandon's lip curled in disgust. He knew exactly what kind of work Vanessa was doing. He fired off a quick response. Fine. The kids miss you. It was a low blow, but Brandon couldn't bring himself to care. Let her feel some guilt for once. As the weeks passed, Brandon noticed Vanessa's health beginning to decline. She complained of fatigue and weakness, dark circles forming under her eyes. But still, she didn't seek medical help, brushing off her symptoms as stress from work. One morning, as Vanessa was rushing out the door for another business trip, Brandon couldn't help but comment. You're looking a bit pale, Vanessa, he said, his tone deceptively casual. Maybe you should see a doctor. Vanessa paused, her hand on the doorknob. I'm fine, Brandon. Just tired. If you say so, Brandon shrugged. But you know, some illnesses can be pretty serious if left untreated. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. What are you implying? Brandon met her gaze, his expression neutral. Nothing at all. Just concern for your health. Have a safe trip. As Vanessa left, slamming the door behind her, Brandon felt a twinge of satisfaction. Let her worry. Let her wonder how much he really knew. A few days later, Brandon received a call from Evan Larkin. "Mr. Hargrove." Evan's gruff voice came through the line. "I've got some interesting information for you." Brandon sat up straighter in his chair. "Go on." "Your wife and Mr. Delaney aren't just using company resources for their little rendezvous," Evan explained. "I've uncovered evidence of some pretty serious corporate fraud. They've been siphoning off funds, manipulating expense reports. It's big, Mr. Hargrove." A slow, cold smile spread across Brandon's face. This was exactly what he needed: leverage not just against Vanessa, but against Travis as well. "Send me everything you have," Brandon instructed. "And keep digging. I want to know every detail of their little operation." As he hung up, Brandon felt a surge of dark triumph. He had them now. All the pieces were falling into place. That evening, as Brandon was helping Max with his homework, Vanessa burst through the front door. She looked terrible pale, shaky, with a sheen of sweat on her forehead. "Mommy!" Max cried, running to hug her. "Are you okay?" Vanessa forced a smile, but Brandon could see the fear in her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little under the weather. Why don't you go play in your room for a bit? Mommy needs to talk to Daddy." As Max scampered off, Vanessa turned to Brandon. I need to talk to you." Brandon raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what about?" Vanessa sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I went to the doctor today. He says I might have contracted a serious illness. He wants to run more tests, but—" She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. Brandon watched her, his expression impassive. Inside, he was seething with rage. Even now, faced with the consequences of her actions, she couldn't bring herself to tell him the whole truth. "A serious illness?" Brandon repeated, his voice cold. "However could that have happened, Vanessa? You've always been so careful with your health." Vanessa flinched at his tone. "Brandon, please. I know things have been strained between us lately, but I need your support right now. I'm scared." For a moment, Brandon was tempted to reveal everything he knew, to watch her crumble under the weight of her lies. But Neil's advice echoed in his mind: keep the illness under wraps until the divorce was finalized. Instead, he stood, looking down at Vanessa with contempt. "You should have thought about that before you made your choices, Vanessa. I hope, for the kid's sake, that it's nothing too serious. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As he walked away, leaving Vanessa sobbing on the couch, Brandon felt a mix of emotions churning inside him. Anger, hurt, a perverse satisfaction at seeing Vanessa suffer. But underneath it all was a deep, aching sadness for what they had lost, for the family that would never be the same again. In his office, Brandon opened his laptop and began composing an email to Neil Kavanaugh. It was time to move forward with the divorce proceedings. Vanessa had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it alone. Brandon sat in Neil Kavanaugh's office, his fingers drumming nervously on the armrest of his chair. The divorce papers lay on the desk between them, a stark reminder of how his life had unraveled in just a few short months. Neil leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on Brandon. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed, Mr. Hargrove? Once we file these papers, there's no going back." Brandon took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'm sure." Vanessa made her choice. Now it's time for her to face the consequences. Neil nodded, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "Very well. With the evidence we've gathered, I'm confident we can achieve everything you're asking for: full custody, the house, most of the assets. Vanessa won't know what hit her." As Brandon reached for the pen to sign the papers, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. Was he really ready to destroy the mother of his children? But then the image of Vanessa with Travis flashed through his mind, and his resolve hardened. "Let's do this," Brandon said, his voice cold as he signed his name with a flourish. Neil gathered up the papers, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Excellent. I'll file these first thing in the morning. Prepare yourself, Mr. Hargrove. Things are about to get very interesting." As Brandon left the office, he felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: relief, anxiety, and a grim satisfaction. The wheels were in motion now. There was no turning back. When Brandon arrived home, he found Vanessa waiting for him in the living room. She looked pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Brandon hung up his coat, not meeting her gaze. "Out!" Vanessa stood, wringing her hands nervously. "Brandon, please. We need to talk." I got the test results back from the doctor." For a moment, Brandon's mask of indifference slipped. Despite everything, a part of him still cared about Vanessa's well-being. "And," he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes. It's not good, Brandon. The doctor says I have syphilis, a particularly aggressive strain. He wants to start treatment right away, but..." She trailed off, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Brandon watched her, conflict raging inside him. Part of him wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But the larger part, the part that had been hurt and betrayed, held him back. "I see," Brandon said, his voice carefully neutral. "And how exactly did you contract syphilis, Vanessa?" Vanessa's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. I don't know. Maybe it was from a public restroom, or don't." Brandon's voice was like ice. "Don't you dare lie to me again. I know about Travis, Vanessa. I know about all of it." The color drained from Vanessa's face. You know?" Brandon laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? The late nights, the business trips, the way you've been pulling away from me, and the kids? I'm not an idiot, Vanessa." Vanessa sank back onto the couch, her body shaking with sobs. "Brandon, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, can we work this out? For the kids." Brandon felt a surge of anger at her words. "The kids? Now you care about the kids? Where was that concern when you were risking their future by sleeping with Travis?" "I made a mistake," Vanessa cried. "People make mistakes, Brandon. Can't you forgive me?" Brandon stared at her, his expression hard. "Forgive you? For throwing away our marriage? For endangering my health and our children's future? No, Vanessa. I can't forgive that." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "These are divorce papers. I've already signed them. You should read them carefully. I'm seeking full custody of the kids and most of our assets." Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. "Divorce? Brandon, no. Please, we can work this out. I'll do anything, go to counseling, whatever you want." "It's too late for that," Brandon said, his voice flat. "You made your choice when you decided to sleep with Travis. Now you have to live with the consequences." As he turned to leave the room, Vanessa called out, her voice desperate. "Brandon, wait. What about my illness? I need help. I need support. I can't go through this alone." Brandon paused at the doorway, not turning around. "You should have thought about that before you brought a potentially fatal STD into our home. Get help from Travis. I'm done." With that, he walked away, leaving Vanessa sobbing on the couch. As he climbed the stairs to check on the kids, Brandon felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was done. Now he could focus on protecting his children and rebuilding their lives. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings moved forward at a rapid pace. Brandon's evidence, combined with Neil Kavanaugh's ruthless tactics, left Vanessa reeling. She hired her own lawyer, but it was clear from the start that she was fighting a losing battle. One afternoon, as Brandon was reviewing some documents in his home office, he received an unexpected call from Lauren Delaney, Travis's wife. "Mr. Hargrove?" Lauren's voice was tense, barely controlled. "I think we need to talk." Brandon's pulse quickened. "Mrs. Delaney, what can I do for you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I received some videos of my husband with your wife." Brandon closed his eyes, a mix of guilt and satisfaction washing over him. He had anonymously sent the evidence to Lauren, knowing it would blow the affair wide open. "I see," he said carefully. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Mrs. Delaney." Lauren's laugh was bitter. "Are you? Because from what I understand, you've known about this for quite some time." Brandon sighed. "You're right. I did know. And I'm truly sorry for not coming to you sooner. I was dealing with my own pain." "I understand," Lauren said, her voice softening slightly. I don't know what to do now. Travis is begging me not to leave him, saying it was a mistake. But how can I ever trust him again?" Brandon felt a twinge of empathy for Lauren. She was an innocent victim in all this, just like him. I can't tell you what to do, Mrs. Delaney, but I can tell you that you deserve better than a man who would betray you like this. There was a long pause. You're right. Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. And I'm sorry for what my husband and your wife have put you through. As the call ended, Brandon leaned back in his chair, feeling a mix of emotions. He had set these events in motion, and now the fallout was spreading beyond just his own family. But he couldn't bring himself to feel guilty. Travis and Vanessa had made their choices. Now they had to face the consequences. The next day, Brandon received a frantic call from Vanessa. "Brandon, what the hell did you do?" she screamed as soon as he picked up. Brandon held the phone away from his ear, wincing at her volume. "What are you talking about, Vanessa? Don't play dumb with me." Vanessa's voice was shrill with panic. "Lauren knows about me and Travis. She's suing him for divorce and demanding everything. And now Travis, he's offering to testify against me in our divorce case." Brandon felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. "Is that so? Well, it seems like your actions are finally catching up with you, Vanessa. How could you do this to me?" Vanessa sobbed. "I'm sick, Brandon. I need help, not this destruction of everything I've worked for." "You did this to yourself," Brandon replied, his voice hard. "You made your choices, Vanessa. Now you have to live with them." As he hung up the phone, Brandon felt a mix of emotions. Part of him still cared for Vanessa, still worried about her health. But a larger part, the part that had been betrayed and hurt, felt only a grim satisfaction. The house of cards she had built was finally tumbling down. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings moved forward at a rapid pace. With Travis turning against Vanessa, offering damning testimony about their affair and the corporate fraud they had engaged in, Vanessa's position crumbled rapidly. In a last, desperate attempt to salvage something, Vanessa showed up at the house one evening. Brandon found her on the doorstep, looking haggard and desperate. "Please, Brandon," she begged, her voice hoarse. "Can we talk? Just give me a chance to explain." Brandon hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. They moved to the kitchen, where Vanessa sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "I've lost everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My job, my reputation. Travis has turned against me completely. And now, with this illness, Brandon, I don't know what to do. I need help." Brandon leaned against the counter, watching her with a mix of pity and lingering anger. "What do you want from me, Vanessa? You threw away our marriage, endangered our family. What did you think would happen?" Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I'm so sorry. But please, Brandon, for the sake of what we once had, for our children, can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? To help me?" For a moment, Brandon felt his resolve waver. The woman before him was a shadow of the vibrant, ambitious person he had married. Part of him wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But then he remembered the videos, the lies, the betrayal. His expression hardened. "You dug your own grave, Vanessa," he said, his voice cold. "I'm sorry you're sick, and I hope you get the treatment you need. But I can't be the one to help you. Not anymore." Vanessa's face crumpled. "Brandon, please. I have nowhere else to go." "You should have thought about that before you decided to throw away everything we built together," Brandon replied. "I think it's time for you to leave." As he showed her to the door, Vanessa turned to him one last time. "What about the kids? Will you at least let me see them?" Brandon paused, conflict clear on his face. "We'll work out a visitation schedule through our lawyers. But for now, I think it's best if you stay away." With that, he closed the door, leaving Vanessa alone on the doorstep. As he leaned against the closed door, Brandon felt a mix of emotions wash over him: relief, sadness, and a lingering anger that he wasn't sure would ever fully fade. In the weeks that followed, the divorce was finalized. True to Neil's word, Brandon was awarded full custody of the children, the house, and most of their assets. Vanessa, her health deteriorating rapidly, was left with almost nothing. Brandon threw himself into rebuilding his life and caring for his children. He took a leave of absence from work, focusing on helping Lily and Max adjust to their new reality. It wasn't as there were tears, tantrums, and difficult questions. But slowly, day by day, they began to heal. One evening, As Brandon was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, is Mommy ever coming home?" Brandon's heart clenched. He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "No, sweetheart. Mommy made some choices that mean she can't live with us anymore. But she still loves you very much." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But why? Didn't she love us enough to stay?" Brandon struggled to find the right words. How do you explain adult betrayal to a child? "Sometimes, Lily, grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes that hurt the people they love. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they have to face the consequences of their actions." Lily nodded, though Brandon could see she didn't fully understand. "Will we ever see her again?" Brandon sighed. "Yes, you'll see her. We're working out a schedule now. But for now, I need you to be brave and patient. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I can be brave, Daddy. I promise." As Brandon turned out the light and closed Lily's door, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. His children were the innocent victims in all of this. He vowed to do everything in his power to protect them and give them the stable, loving home they deserved. Months passed. Brandon settled into his new role as a single father, juggling work and childcare with the help of a nanny. The kids slowly adjusted to their new normal, though there were still difficult moments and questions about their mother. One afternoon, Brandon received a call from the hospital. Vanessa had been admitted, her condition critical. Despite everything that had happened, Brandon felt a pang of concern. He debated whether to go see her, unsure if he could face her after everything that had happened. In the end, it was Lily who made the decision for him. "Daddy," she said, her young face serious, "if Mommy is sick, shouldn't we go see her? That's what families do, right?" Brandon looked at his daughter, marveling at her capacity for forgiveness and love. "You're right, sweetheart. That is what families do." They arrived at the hospital to find Vanessa a shadow of her former self. She was pale and gaunt, her once vibrant hair limp and dull. When she saw Brandon and the kids, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," she whispered, her voice weak. Brandon nodded, his expression guarded. "The kids wanted to see you." As Lily and Max hugged their mother, chattering about school and their lives, Brandon watched from the corner of the room. He felt a complex mix of emotions: anger, pity, and a lingering sadness for what might have been. When the kids stepped out to get a snack from the vending machine, Vanessa turned to Brandon. "Thank you," she said softly, "for bringing them, and for everything. I know I don't deserve your kindness." Brandon sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, you don't. But they deserve to see their mother. And despite everything, I wouldn't want you to be alone right now." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Brandon, for everything. I know it's too late, but I need you to know that." Brandon nodded, his throat tight. "I know, and I hope you get better, Vanessa, for the kids' sake." As they left the hospital that day, Brandon felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't forgiven Vanessa, not completely, but he had found a way to move forward, to put his children's needs first. In the months that followed, Brandon focused on rebuilding his life. He threw himself into his work, earning a promotion that allowed him to provide an even better life for his children. He started dating again, cautiously at first, always putting Lily and Max's well-being first. Vanessa's health improved slightly with treatment, though the doctors warned her she would never fully recover. She had visitation with the kids, supervised at first, then gradually more relaxed as she proved she could be responsible. One evening, as Brandon sat on the back porch watching Lily and Max play in the yard, he reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal, the anger, the pain, it had all shaped him, changed him in ways he was still discovering. But as he watched his children laugh and play, Brandon felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had survived the storm. They were healing, growing stronger every day. And while the scars of Vanessa's betrayal would always be there, Brandon knew that he and his children would be okay. He had weathered the storm, protected his family, and come out stronger on the other side. And as the sun set on another day, Brandon Hargrove looked to the future with hope and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them for himself and for his children.